Just like with any franchise, whether it's TV shows, movies, or in this case, video games, there's always a need, a desire for sequels, prequels. Whether they turn out to be good or not remains to be seen. The same goes for the hypothetical sequel in the Mafia franchise, Mafia IV, which is a game that a lot of Mafia fans are hoping that Hangar 13 is working on. By the way, we're going to have spoilers for the entire Mafia franchise, from Mafia Definitive Edition, Mafia City Lost Heaven, Mafia 2, Mafia 3. Spoiler warning before we dive into my Mafia 4 wish list. What I would like to see Mafia 4 be all about and include, and by the way, let me know below in the comment section, what are some things you'd like to see in a hypothetical Mafia 4 game below in the comment section. So before we go over my wish list, let's talk about the facts or information that we have that could confirm or tie in to a potential Mafia 4 game. Over a year ago, there was an article that was on Reddit, and I think it's gone now, but fortunately somebody managed to screenshot it back then, so I still technically have the article screenshotted for us to go over. And I think it can be verified. I think it can be true because the article talks about a Mafia 2 remaster, and there was a Mafia 2 remaster as well as a Mafia 3 remaster in Mafia 2 and 3 Definitive Editions. The one part I think that they may not have gotten entirely correct was referring to the Mafia 2 remaster coming sooner than you think, which was right, but they assumed that it was being worked on by the Czech branch of Hangar 13, where in fact they were actually working on a remake to Mafia City Lost Heaven, which came out a few months ago, Mafia Definitive Edition. So I think that the truth teller might have actually had some truth in this, I guess, long gone or buried Reddit file that I happened to screenshot a year ago. So here's the basics, if we are to believe the information from the truth teller regarding Mafia 4. Apparently, it was originally canceled and passed on by Hangar 13 management in favor of an original IP, and I believe the original IP was Rhapsody, I believe, which was going to be based in Berlin, East Germany in the 80s. You were going to play as a spy, but it got shelved. And Czech had been working on Mafia Definitive Edition, which, as I mentioned, has come out already. Received really good reviews, and hopefully the sales for Mafia Definitive Edition as well as the Mafia Trilogy have done well enough to merit Mafia 4, hopefully currently in production by Hangar 13. So here's some of the ideas that allegedly might involve Mafia 4. Some of this may end up becoming part of Mafia 4. Some of this could have been reworked or scrapped or abandoned, but we'll go over parts of this article. After development of their original project wasn't gaining any traction, they decided to assemble a small unit. From them became the Hangar 13 in Brighton, the United Kingdom. This team, according to two developer sources, picked up the original Mafia 4 pitches and prototypes and hit the ground running. After a good 5-6 months of internal struggles, they decided that the project was ambitious and something they wished to pursue. Now every branch, aside from Czech Republic, is getting to it, working on Mafia 4. So Czech was working on, obviously, as we now know, Mafia Definitive Edition, which implies that the Czech branch is probably also at work, along with the rest of the branches of Hangar 13, on Mafia 4, if we are to believe this information from a year ago. The game, according to two developer sources and a journalist, will indeed be set in 70s Vegas and continue on from where Mafia 3 left off. You'll play as a new protagonist and will return to you playing as an Italian mob in the Vegas golden years of organized crime. Said to be very Scorsese-esque, which obviously based off of some movies by Martin Scorsese like Goodfellas, Casino, etc. The game will feature a huge map to traverse, of course. The story will span a decade, according to the developer sources. Other developer claims that this was initially not the case, as they wanted to continue the documentary style of Mafia 3 storytelling at first, but instead will be more traditional now with the non-flashbacks or interviews ahead of the events. I'm not sure if any characters will return. I never asked this, unfortunately, although I would expect Vito to make an appearance at the very least. Gone are the repetitive missions from Mafia 3. They know they effed up there. Apparently, the story behind that is a bit murky. The game of Mafia 3 originally allowed you to go straight to the racket bosses, each with unique encounters and deaths, and not have to deal with repetitive filler stuff. But as a release date loomed over the developers, the producers were pressuring them to get it shipped and had to make some quality drawbacks. Many planned mechanics for Mafia 3 have made their way into Mafia 4, one of which is an empire building system, far more in depth than anything that I've ever seen in the game before. It's insane the stuff they plan with this. One of my sources was telling me how you can literally build, buy out, and expand casinos. You take a rundown building and turn it into a metropolis. It'll be on a new version of the Mafia 3 engine, massively overhauled. Many of the technical issues that plagued Mafia 3 now mostly non-existent apparently. Motion capture began on the game about 8-9 months ago, expected to be revealed next year with a 2021 release. Next gen, obviously. For the record, this game has yet to be officially revealed, but Hangar 13 does like to use motion capture for both Mafia 3 as well as Mafia Definitive Edition, so it's very possible that they have the actors, actresses, voice actresses mo-capping their parts for Mafia 4, hypothetically, and maybe because of the bug, they have pushed back the reveal for Mafia 4 to perhaps 2021. So it wouldn't surprise me while the branch of Czech of Hangar 13 was focused on Mafia Definitive Edition, the rest of Hangar 13 have been focused on Mafia 4, and we're simply waiting for Mafia Definitive Edition to come out, get the hype back up for the Mafia franchise, hopefully sell well enough, Mafia Definitive Edition as well as Mafia Trilogy, in order to merit Mafia 4 going further in development. That's just my speculation, but I do believe that there is a Mafia 4 in the works, and some of this information from this truth teller off of Reddit is probably believable based off some of the other information that he went over, including the fact that Mafia 2 did have a remaster along with Mafia 3, and Czech obviously was working on not a remaster for Mafia 2, but for a remake of Mafia: The City of Lost Heaven. Obviously, he didn't have all the information. He just had bits of info here and there, but we can connect the dots, and I think this information can be taken as mostly legit. Another bit of information I would like to go over before we get to my wish list, don't worry, I'm getting there, all this ties into the wish list, is the cigarette cards from Mafia Definitive Edition. Someone pointed me in the direction of one specific cigarette card, which features a character known as Louis Romeo and the fictional city of Los Ondas. Now, Los Ondas is not mentioned in any other place except for the cigarette card, and I believe at the Lost Heaven Airport, also along with Bourbon City. I don't know what Bourbon City is. Some people speculated that that was going to be the Mafia version of Vegas, but I honestly don't know. However, if we go by previous cities in the Mafia verse, it is quite possible that even though Los Ondas is Spanish for the waves, which implies that Los Ondas could be based off of Los Angeles, it could actually be a hybrid of two cities, Los Angeles as well as Las Vegas. So it could be predominantly Las Vegas, a little bit of Los Angeles mixed in, just pushed over to the West Coast on the edge of the ocean with some beaches and whatnot. Similar to Lost Heaven, which features predominantly Chicago, a little bit of San Francisco influence there, and then Empire Bay of Mafia 2, mostly New York City, but there's obviously a few other influences of other real American cities as well when it came to both Empire Bay as well as Lost Heaven. And for the record, New Bordeaux, even though it's mostly based off of New Orleans, there's also influences of other cities that mix up into New Bordeaux as well. So Los Ondas could very well be the next location in Mafia 4, and it doesn't necessarily mean that Los Ondas has to be 100% LA or 100% Las Vegas. It could just simply be its own city based off of both. Maybe like 50-50 or 60-40, somewhere in that ballpark. Now, Louis could very well be the Don of the city of Los Ondas. He could be the one that is the main boss or an antagonist or maybe one of the crime bosses featured in the city of Los Angeles by the time you get to the 1970s. Or maybe it's his son, because I believe that the cigarette card implies that Louis is doing his thing in the 1930s in Los Angeles. So he would be an old man by the 1970s. But at the same time, I'm sure that Hangar 13, if they have a plan for Louis Romeo in Mafia 4, perhaps as the Don of the Romeo crime family in Los Angeles, then they would most likely be able to make that work. Then again, they could go with a completely different family altogether. But for all intents and purposes, let's just go with Romeo crime family. Why not? So the protagonist, as we went over in the information from that Reddit article over a year ago, obviously is going to be Italian-American, going to be within a mafia crime family. And I'm going to go all Godfather here, kind of, sort of. I know they mentioned something about Martin Scorsese, but since Godfather came out in the 1970s, we're just going to mix in a little bit of Scorsese, a little bit of Godfather as well. Let's just say that the protagonist is the son of Don Romeo. Let's just say it's Louis Jr., right? Or maybe Louis Jr. is his older brother, and you're playing like a middle child, and he's just a young prince. He has to get out there to, make a name for himself, prove himself to the family. And maybe there was a time he tried to be legit, similar to Michael Corleone. He didn't want to go into the family business at first, went to school, went to college, got educated, but he kind of was underneath the shadow of the Romeo crime family. And no matter what he did, he couldn't escape from it. So eventually he decides to simply just embrace it. And obviously, I would like this to involve the family, the Romeo crime family, which would include an older brother. Perhaps he's the heir to the Romeo crime family. Perhaps that's Louis Jr. He's kind of smart, tough guy, maybe not as smart as his younger brother. As you can tell, there's some parallels that I'm working between the Corleone brothers and the protagonist and his brother in Mafia 4. And perhaps there's also a younger sister who's kind of strong, independent, and she's a daddy's girl, but she also wants to be involved in the family business as well. I would like for them to also include in the family a tough matriarch of sorts, the wife of Don Romeo. Smart, tough love, tough talking mom, unofficially the right hand and consigliere to the Don. Maybe she's a little bit younger than the Don, since he'd probably be pretty old by the 1970s. Maybe she's like 20 years younger. She's smart. She's kind of running the operation, specifically the legitimate businesses as well as the charities. She's like the friendly face of the Romeo family, but behind the scenes, you see a different side of Mama Romeo. There's definitely elements I think that Hangar 13 should take from previous Mafia games and incorporate them into Mafia 4. I guess you could say it's kind of like a trial and error learning process. Everything that they've learned from Mafia, City of Lost Heaven, Mafia Definitive Edition, Mafia 2, as well as Mafia 3, compiled together could make a fantastic overall experience in Mafia 4. Some of the elements I would say is obvious. You want a great story, because that's the backbone of these Mafia games. A good story, great protagonists, as well as interesting supporting characters, antagonists, a real-world feel, vibe, as well as consequences for actions taken throughout the story of Mafia 4. And since it's the 1970s, you definitely want some 1970s era vehicles. Also, you could go further back, because even in the 1970s, it wasn't just all 1970s cars. There were vehicles still running around from the 60s, from the 50s, and you could always put vehicles in from the 40s and 30s as well that you know and love from Mafia Definitive Edition, as well as Mafia 2 and Mafia 3, that are roaming around Los Angeles that you could acquire and customize as well as upgrade. Music from the 70s, probably 60s, 70s music, that would be really good. Clothing, the world events happening in that time period would play a part, or at least be in the background on the radio, on TV, in the events of Mafia 4. I want there to be a number of safe houses that you can acquire, earn, purchase, not just one. And I also want the safe houses to have some customization to them, as well as upgrades, perhaps a wardrobe room, trophy room for collectibles and whatnot. And that was one thing that kind of disappointed me about Mafia 3. I know there's probably a few of you that have a nice list of disappointments. But the mansion down in the bayou, I always wanted Lincoln to be able to customize and upgrade the mansion down in the bayou as his safe house, as his base of operation. I know you can eventually upgrade the bar, Sammy's bar. I know that, but it would have been really cool if you could have also upgraded that mansion down in the bayou as well. Circling back to vehicle customization and upgrades, I feel like this is where Mafia 2 got it right. Now, Mafia 2 got a lot of things right, one of which was the vehicle customization, paint jobs, rims, the ability to customize your license plate, and do some various other upgrades to your vehicles, plus the ability to store an impressive amount of vehicles in your garage. And that's another thing that is borrowed in Mafia Definitive Edition. So I definitely like that in Mafia 4. A variety of vehicles to customize, upgrade, either buy or quote-unquote acquire off the streets of Los Andes. And clothing stores. I definitely want some clothing stores, barbershop, restaurants to go eat at, maybe take dates to, bars, nightclubs, various casinos. And I want there to be an actual economy for our protagonist where he's earning money. The harder he works, the more money he earns from the family, the more his cut increases. And he's able to spend it on stuff like a variety of clothing items, as well as, some facial customization, hair customization. Players really do love having customization options when it comes to their characters in video games. Even if the character is already established with their own name, their own voice actor, their own story, there also needs to be a variety of additional options that the player has in order to help make that character their own. Even if there is some ridiculous outfits that you can end up finding or acquiring or wearing on your character throughout the events of Mafia 4, there also needs to be, I guess, weapons dealers and customizable upgrades for your weapons, different ammo types, whether it's melee weapons or firearms. I also like the idea of being limited by the weapons you can carry, similar to Mafia 3 as well as Mafia Definitive Edition. I think that you have to pick and choose a firearm, a pistol, a revolver, and then either a shotgun, a Tommy gun, like an AR or an AK-47, because this is the 70s we're talking about. I don't want there to be like a walking arsenal, which is what you had in Mafia 2 as well as in the Grand Theft Auto series. So I definitely like the idea where your character, you have to decide what your loadout is going to be. Pros, cons, etc. Whether you want to go in with a sniper rifle, which is good for long range, but maybe up close it's not going to be so good, forcing you to use your 1911 or a 38 Special or a Magnum. So I definitely love the idea of weapon customizations, weapon options, whether it's firearms, melee weapons, throwables, etc. The structure of Mafia 4, I think, needs to be similar to Mafia 3. I know some of you love the linear story arc from start to finish of Mafia Definitive Edition as well as Mafia 2, but I feel like in this case, I think that Mafia 3 was right to go in the open world-esque, where if you wanted to move on to the next mission, you simply drive to the location in order to initiate the next mission instead of it just simply starting one mission, one chapter after the next. That way you have time to enjoy the world of Mafia 4 in between main story missions. There would also be obviously side quests you could do, rackets, collectibles, and the rackets could be a variety of things. And I know that repetitiveness is a problem in Mafia 3 when it came to the rackets. And there could be incentive for you to stick with the rackets, like gambling, pawn shops, businesses, nightclubs, bars, brothels, etc. But maybe you don't have to do it every time. Maybe you can just leave somebody in charge to run this club or this casino, this pawn shop, etc. But if you want to become more involved and you want to go in there and actually do stuff for each of these rackets, the incentive is you're going to make additional money by actually actively being involved in the rackets. Even if they can be repetitive, at least it's another way for your character to make additional money in Mafia 4. I also would like to have some free ride fun in Mafia 4. Races, along with other activities that exist in the game itself that you can go do when you're just bored. Maybe you can just go run around hanging out with the stars, or go swimming in the ocean, riding around on a boat, or any other fun things that you could possibly end up doing in Mafia 4 besides the main story, side quests, rackets. The empire building that they talked about in that Reddit article sounds very enticing, very interesting. And I honestly hope that it's true because of that, because that sounds really cool. The ability to go in and buy a building, fix it up, build it up, make it awesome, and customize it to your heart's content. That's definitely something that's going to make Mafia 4 potentially a lot of fun. Once again, if that turns out to be the case. Something I really liked from Mafia Definitive Edition, a few things, including the settings. I like the variety of settings that they had for Mafia Definitive Edition. The difficulties, I love the difficulties. I want them to have a variety, whether it's like easy, medium, hard, the classic difficulty. I like that. The ability to like remove or add HUDs. The ability to go in and have a photo mode. That's something that I really wish we had in Mafia Definitive Edition. That needs to be in Mafia 4. We need a photo mode and some other modes as well. Maybe a noir mode or maybe like a funky 70s mode as well. And the skip drive mode. That's something that not that many people used in Mafia Definitive Edition. And there are players that simply don't like driving from point A to point B across the map. And I hope that they implement the skip drive option in Mafia 4. Optional, of course. But it would be convenient for players that simply just want a way to fast travel from point A to point B without having to constantly drive. It can be tiresome after a while, and I had that issue in Mafia 2 as well as Mafia 3, and I definitely wish they would have had a fast travel ability, at least from safe house to safe house for Vito as well as Lincoln Clay, and I hope that we have something like that in Mafia 4. Now that we've talked about a lot of the stuff that I would like to see, protagonists, family members, as well as some other features from Mafia Definitive Edition 2, 3 that I would like to see featured, let's talk a little bit about antagonists that could possibly be in Mafia 4. Now, it's possible that Romeo is the Don, that he's your father, that he runs the city, or maybe he's just one of a few Dons. Maybe there's another rival Don, similar to Salieri versus Morello, or maybe there's 3 crime families, just like in Empire Bay, or maybe there's an up-and-coming mob boss that's trying to take down Romeo and your family as well, or there's simply other rival gangs that exist in Los Undas that you have to either make peace with or try to take out. Maybe it allows you that option, right, to negotiate, to use diplomacy, and maybe you can get this gang on your side and work with that gang, and maybe work against that gang. You know, there'll be pros and cons depending on which direction you wish to go. That would be cool. But you would also have to keep the cops happy, keep them off your back, keep them bribed, I guess. So you would obviously have, I guess, members of the Los Ondas Police Department on your payroll. But at the same time, another major antagonist would have to be the FBI trying to bring down your family, because that was a big fall for the crime families in the 70s, 80s, and I think up into the 90s, when the FBI really came hard on the crime families, and that brought about their ending. So the FBI definitely needs to play a role as an antagonistic force when it comes to you as well as your family. Corporations could technically be another antagonist because they're coming in, they're taking over these casinos, they got way more money and power than the mafia families because the mafia's power is starting to wane. And I have an idea for another character that is going to involve a spoiler once again. The specific FBI agent charged with bringing down the Romeo crime family would be a young agent Thomas Angelo Jr. Now, how can there be a Thomas Angelo Jr.? No, I'm not talking about one of my subscribers. In some screenshots from the finale of Mafia Definitive Edition, it is implied, as far as we can tell, that Tommy and Sarah Angelo actually end up having a son. They had a daughter, but somewhere along the way, they ended up having a son. Now, we don't know what the name of the son happens to be. I think he's too old to be their grandkid, so we're all just implying that they had him sometime later after they had their daughter. So we're just going to call him Tommy Angelo Jr. Why not? So my theory is Tommy Angelo Jr. is going to be hell-bent on a crusade to bring down organized crime, which stems all the way back to 1951, Empire Bay, He's looking outside his bedroom window. He sees his dad watering the lawn. He sees two guys walking up to his father, and one of them blows him away and then drives off. Ever since that moment, Tommy Angelo Jr. has vowed revenge against organized crime. His father and his mother told him about their life in the Salieri crime family, so Tommy Angelo Jr. is quite familiar with it. But ever since that key moment in 1951, when he lost his father to organized crime, he decided he was going to avenge his father and everyone else that had died at the hands of organized crime. Eventually, he gets himself into the FBI, works his way up the ranks, and becomes an avenging Angelo. The twist I'm going for later on in the game is the fact that you eventually get to play as Tommy Angelo Jr. So you'll be going back and forth between two protagonists on both sides of the law. Young Romeo, who's trying to make his father proud, trying to work his way up the crime family business. But unfortunately, things are not going to go so well for the Romeo crime family. It's about to be on its way down. With all these games, bad things will happen to members of the crime family. And maybe somehow Romeo finds a way out. I don't know how that would play out, but at the same time, it'd be quite interesting to see the dynamic between Romeo and Thomas Angelo Jr., a.k.a. the Avenging Angelo. And there's also going to be ties to the rest of the Mafia-verse. Maybe Thomas Angelo Jr. helps bring down Leo. Perhaps he brings down Vito as well. Perhaps he gets revenge on Joe, who's trying to protect older Leo. And Tommy Angelo Jr. in the situation thinks, hey, there's the guy that killed my father. He's pointing a gun at me. Perhaps before he guns down Joe Barbaro, he says, my father sends his regards. Boom! Plot twist. In a way, you could actually tie the events from the first Mafia game, whether you want to go with Mafia City of Lost Heaven, or specifically in this case, Mafia Definitive Edition, Mafia 2, as well as Mafia 3, and then tie it all together into Mafia 4. Specifically, if you have this character, this FBI agent named Agent Thomas Angelo Jr., a.k.a. Avenging Angelo, who's trying to bring down the Romeo crime family in Los Ondos. On the other side, the other character you play as, predominantly, mostly through the game, is Louis Romeo's second son. So that's my vision, my wish list for the most part for Mafia 4, what I would like to see happen, how I would like to envision it playing out if Hangar 13 set me down and asked me to pitch them an idea for Mafia 4. This would pretty much be it. Whether or not that actually turns out to be the case remains to be seen. But I do love the idea of a twist going further into the game, much better than Last of Us Part 2, by the way, where you end up realizing that the FBI agent pursuing the Romeo crime family happens to be Thomas Angelo's son, Tommy Angelo Jr. Now, how that conflict plays out between young Romeo and Thomas Angelo Jr. in the climax and conclusion of Mafia 4 remains to be seen. But anyways, that's my overall wish list for Mafia 4, based off some information that we have. Some of it may be true. Some of it actually is. If you go by that cigarette card from Mafia Definitive Edition, yeah, there's some information we could go on in order to kind of sort of put together a hypothetical vision for what Mafia 4 might end up being. Then again, it could be something completely different. That's the fun thing about these wish lists, ideas, theories, speculation. It's just fun to come together and just throw out our ideas for what we would like to see in the next Mafia game. Your wish list regarding Mafia 4, or what you liked or didn't like about my vision, my wish list of Mafia 4, as always, welcome below in the comments section.